you here, and today's story is one we think you'll really enjoy. So without further ado, let's begin. Dominic Reeves slouched in his ergonomic chair, the glow of his computer screen casting harsh shadows across his face. The clock in the corner of his monitor mockingly displayed 11:37 p.m. Another late night at Reeves and Associates, par for the course for the 42-year-old structural engineer and co-founder. His phone buzzed, dancing across the polished mahogany of his desk. Dominic glanced at the screen. Vanessa's name illuminated, his brow furrowed. She was supposed to be at a sustainable architecture conference in Chicago. Maybe she was calling to say goodnight? Before he could reach for the device, it connected on its own. Dominic froze, his hand hovering above the phone as unfamiliar laughter and the clink of glasses filtered through the speaker. A man's voice, smooth and confident, cut through the background noise. Another round on Reeves and Associates tab. That clueless fool is financing our little venture without even knowing it. Dominic's blood ran cold. He gripped the edge of his desk, knuckles whitening as Vanessa's reply came clearly through the speaker. Dom's always been blind to anything beyond his precious buildings. He's so boring. He practically blends into the walls he designs. The mysterious man chuckled, a sound that sent shivers down Dominic's spine. Well, soon enough, those walls will come crumbling down, to us and to the future of Obsidian structures. The call abruptly ended as background noise suggested Vanessa finally noticed her phone was on. Dominic sat in stunned silence, his world suddenly off-kilter. The carefully constructed reality he'd built his life around had just shattered like poorly tempered glass. Over the next week, Dominic maintained a facade of normalcy while secretly investigating. He went through the motions at work, nodding at appropriate times during meetings and signing off on designs with mechanical precision. But behind his calm exterior, his mind raced, piecing together the puzzle of betrayal. Late one night, hunched over his laptop in his home office, Dominic's fingers flew across the keyboard. He'd been digging into Vanessa's recent communications and financial records. His chest tightened as he uncovered the identity of her lover, Xavier Blackwood, CEO of rival firm Obsidian Structures. Damn it, Dominic muttered. He needed help, someone who could dig deeper than he could alone. The next day, Dominic found himself in a dimly lit coffee shop, sitting across from Lydia Chen. She was a brilliant but unconventional private investigator with a background in corporate espionage. Her sharp eyes assessed him over the rim of her mug. "So, Mr. Reeves," Lydia said, her voice low, "you want me to look into your wife and this Blackwood character?" Dominic nodded, sliding a folder across the table. "I need to know everything. How long this has been going on, what information they've shared, all of it." Lydia's findings over the following days made Dominic's stomach churn. Vanessa had been leaking confidential designs and bid information to Xavier for months. The crown jewel of Reeves and Associates, their groundbreaking eco-friendly skyscraper project, the Verdant Spire, was Obsidian's primary target. As if the professional betrayal wasn't enough, Dominic discovered large, unexplained withdrawals from the company accounts tracing back months. The magnitude of Vanessa's deceit was staggering. Unable to bear the weight alone, Dominic called his best friend and business partner, Marcus Holbrook, to meet him at their favorite bar. Marcus listened in shocked silence as Dominic laid out the sordid details. When Dominic finished, Marcus downed his whiskey in one gulp and signaled for another. "Jesus, Dom," Marcus said, shaking his head. "I can't believe Vanessa would do this. To you, to the company, to all of us." He reached across the bar, gripping Dominic's shoulder. "Whatever you need, whatever it takes to fix this mess, I'm with you. We'll make it right." Dominic nodded, a smile tugging at his lips. For the first time since that fateful phone call, he felt a glimmer of hope. He wasn't alone in this fight. Dominic sat at his desk, a legal pad before him covered in scribbled notes and diagrams. He was crafting a multifaceted plan for revenge, targeting both personal and professional retribution. His pen moved swiftly as he outlined his strategy, each step carefully considered. First, he began feeding false information about the Verdant Spire project through channels he knew Vanessa was monitoring. He created dummy files with subtly flawed designs and left them where she would easily find them. Next, Dominic anonymously tipped off Elizabeth Blackwood, Xavier's wife and Obsidian CFO, about potential financial irregularities in the company. He smirked as he imagined the chaos this would cause in both Xavier's professional and personal life. Dominic called Gabriela Santos, an ambitious junior architect at his firm, into his office. As she sat across from him, he leaned forward, his voice low and conspiratorial. "Gabriela, I have a special project I'd like you to assist me with," he said, watching her eyes light up with interest. "There may be a significant promotion in it for you if we're successful." As Gabriela left his office, practically buzzing with excitement, Dominic turned his attention to his public image. He began making large, traceable donations to environmental charities, creating a persona of a philanthropic businessman deeply invested in sustainability. Under the guise of product testing for the Verdant Spire, Dominic installed cutting-edge security systems in both his home and office. He couldn't afford to leave any vulnerabilities for Vanessa or Xavier to exploit. The day Vanessa was due to return from her conference, Dominic stood in front of the bathroom mirror, practicing his expressions. He had to play the role of devoted husband perfectly while setting his plans in motion. As he heard the front door open, Dominic took a deep breath, steeling himself for the performance of his life. He plastered on a warm smile and walked downstairs to greet his wife. "Welcome home, honey," he said, embracing Vanessa and planting a kiss on her cheek. "How was the conference?" Vanessa's smile didn't quite reach her eyes as she launched into a rehearsed spiel about sustainable design innovations. Dominic nodded along, asking appropriate questions while inwardly marveling at the ease with which she lied. As they settled into their evening routine, Dominic felt a cold determination settle over him. The game was on, and he intended to win. Dominic Reeves stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie with practiced precision. His reflection stared back at him, a mask of calm hiding the storm brewing beneath. It had been 2 weeks since Vanessa's return from her conference, and the game was well underway. He picked up his phone, scrolling through a series of text messages between himself and Gabriela Santos. The exchanges were innocent enough at first glance. Discussions about the Verdant Spire project, peppered with the occasional flirtatious comment. But Dominic knew better. Each message was a carefully placed breadcrumb, leading down a path of fabricated infidelity. As he drove to work, Dominic's mind wandered to Gabriela. The young architect had proven to be an invaluable asset in his plan. Her enthusiasm for the special project was genuine, even if she didn't know the full scope of what she was involved in. He felt a twinge of guilt, using her ambition as a pawn in his game of revenge. But he quickly pushed the feeling aside. In this war, there would be collateral damage. Arriving at the office, Dominic made his way to the conference room where the project teams were gathering. He nodded at Marcus, who gave him a knowing look. As the meeting began, Dominic cleared his throat. "I have an announcement to make," he said, his voice carrying across the room. "Given the critical nature of the Verdant Spire project, I've decided to assign Gabriela Santos to lead the environmental sustainability aspect." He watched Vanessa from the corner of his eye, noting the slight narrowing of her gaze as she glanced between him and Gabriela. The seed of suspicion had been planted. Across town, Lydia Chin adjusted her cleaning uniform, pushing a cart of supplies down the hallway of Obsidian Structure's main office. Her keen eyes scanned each room she entered, identifying optimal locations for her surveillance equipment. With practiced ease, she planted bugs in strategic spots, beneath desks, behind picture frames, inside air vents. As she worked, snippets of conversation drifted to her ears. Executives discussed profit margins and market shares, but it was the hushed tones in Xavier Blackwood's office that caught her attention. She lingered near the doorway, pretending to dust a nearby shelf. "The structural integrity reports for Project Apex are concerning," a voice murmured. "If this gets out, we're finished." Lydia's eyebrows raised slightly. Project Apex, Obsidian's flagship development. This was exactly the kind of information Dominic had hired her to uncover. Back at Reeves and Associates, Dominic sat in his office, poring over the latest reports from the Verdant Spire project. A knock at the door interrupted his concentration. "Come in," he called, not looking up from his desk. Vanessa entered, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. "Dom, do you have a minute?" He glanced up, noting the tension in her posture. "Of course. What's on your mind?" She hesitated, then spoke in a rush. "I couldn't help but notice you've been spending a lot of time with Gabriella lately. Is there something I should know?" Dominic leaned back in his chair, his face a perfect mask of innocence. "She's leading a crucial part of the Verdant Spire project. Of course we're going to be working closely together." Vanessa's eyes narrowed slightly. "Right, of course." She turned to leave, then paused at the door. "We should have dinner tonight. It's been a while since we've had a proper meal together." As the door closed behind her, Dominic allowed himself a small smile. The puppet master's strings were beginning to tighten. Later that evening, as Dominic prepared for his dinner with Vanessa, his phone buzzed with a message from Lydia. He opened it, his eyes widening as he read the contents. A major flaw in Obsidian's Project Apex. This was the break they'd been waiting for. With quick, decisive keystrokes, Dominic composed an anonymous email. He sent it to several industry watchdogs, hinting at potential safety concerns in Obsidian's latest development. As he hit send, he could almost hear the whispers of concern spreading among Obsidian's investors. Across the city, in the offices of Reeves and Associates, Marcus Holbrook worked late into the night. He pored over legal documents and financial statements, quietly shoring up the company's defenses. Every contract was scrutinized, every financial transaction double-checked. They would be ready for whatever storm was coming. As the pieces of his plan fell into place, Dominic felt a surge of satisfaction. The counterattack had begun, and Obsidian structures would never see it coming. Xavier Blackwood's office was a testament to his success. Floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city, modern art adorning the walls, and a desk that probably cost more than most people's cars. But none of that impressed Dominic Reeves as he sat across from his rival, maintaining a carefully crafted facade of desperation. "I never thought I'd be sitting here, having this conversation," Dominic said, his voice tinged with what sounded like regret. "But the truth is, Xavier, I'm considering selling my shares in Reeves and Associates." Xavier's eyebrows shot up, a predatory glint in his eyes. "Really? I have to say, Dominic, I'm surprised. Your company has always been your pride and joy." Dominic nodded, looking down at his hands. "Things change. The stress of running the company, the constant pressure, it's taking its toll. I think it might be time for me to step back, focus on other aspects of my life." As Xavier leaned forward, interest piqued, Dominic knew he had him hooked. Over the next hour, he fed Xavier a masterfully crafted web of misinformation about the Verdant Spire project. He watched with inward satisfaction as Xavier's eyes lit up at what he thought were critical flaws in the design, opportunities that Obsidian could exploit. Little did Xavier know, he was walking into a trap of Dominic's making. Meanwhile, across town, Vanessa Reeves sat in her office at Reeves and Associates, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. She stared at her computer screen unseeing as she replayed the events of the past few weeks in her head. Dominic's sudden interest in Gabriela Santos had thrown her off balance. She'd always seen her husband as predictable, reliable, boring even. But now, doubt gnawed at her. Was he having an affair? The thought both infuriated and terrified her. Her phone buzzed with a message from Xavier. "Meeting went well. Dom's considering selling. This could be our chance." Vanessa's heart raced. This was what they'd been waiting for, wasn't it? The opportunity to take control of Reeves and Associates, to reshape it in their vision. But as she thought about the life she'd built with Dominic, the comfort and security he provided, a wave of uncertainty washed over her. She picked up a file from her desk, intending to review some calculations for the Verdant Spire project. As she flipped through the pages, Her distracted mind failed to catch a critical error in the numbers. She signed off on the document, unaware of the costly mistake she'd just made. Across the hall, Gabriela Santos worked diligently on her portion of the Verdant Spire project. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about Dominic's recent behavior. The late-night meetings, the secretive phone calls, the way he'd suddenly thrust her into a high-profile role. It all felt calculated. As she pored over the latest designs, a notification popped up on her computer. An email from the IT department, warning about a potential security breach. Gabriela's eyes narrowed as she read the details. Someone had been accessing confidential files related to the Verdant Spire project, files that only a handful of people should have had access to. Her mind raced. Could it be Dominic? Was this why he'd brought her onto the project? To cover his tracks as he sold company secrets? Determined to uncover the truth, Gabriela began her own investigation, unaware that she was playing right into Dominic's hands. In another part of the city, Elizabeth Blackwood sat in her home office, a glass of wine in hand, as she reviewed Obsidian's latest financial reports. As CFO, it was her job to ensure the company's fiscal health. But lately, something had been nagging at her. Small discrepancies in the books, unexplained expenses, meetings that her husband failed to mention. Her computer pinged with a new email. Anonymous sender. She opened it, her eyes widening as she scrolled through its contents. Photos of Xavier with Vanessa Reeves, snippets of incriminating emails, records of suspicious financial transactions. Elizabeth's hand shook as she set down her wine glass. She glanced at the calendar on her desk. The board meeting was tomorrow. This couldn't be a coincidence. As the sun set over the city, the various players in this high-stakes game of deception moved their pieces, each unaware of the true complexity of the board they were playing on. Back in his office, Dominic leaned back in his chair, a satisfied smile playing on his lips. The double-edged gambit was in motion. Xavier thought he was closing in on a victory, but in reality, he was leading himself and Vanessa right into Dominic's carefully laid trap. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Gabriela entered, her face a mask of determination. "Mr. Reeves, we need to talk," she said, her voice steady despite the nervousness evident in her eyes. Dominic nodded, gesturing for her to take a seat. He'd been expecting this confrontation. It was time to bring Gabriela fully into the fold. "I know something's going on," Gabriela continued. "The security breaches, the strange assignments, the way you've been acting. I want to know what's really happening." Dominic studied her for a moment, then made his decision. "You're right, Gabriela. There is more going on than you know, and I think it's time I told you everything." Over the next hour, Dominic laid out the entire situation. Vanessa's betrayal, Xavier's schemes, and his own plan for revenge. He watched as shock, anger, and finally understanding flashed across Gabriela's face. "So, where do I fit into all this?" she asked when he'd finished. Dominic leaned forward, his eyes intense. "I'm offering you a choice, Gabriela. Walk away now, no hard feelings. Or stay, become a true partner in this, and help me save this company. If we succeed, I promise you'll have a future here beyond anything you've imagined." Gabriela was quiet for a long moment, weighing her options. Finally, she met Dominic's gaze. "I'm in. What do you need me to do?" As Gabriela left his office, now fully committed to their cause, Dominic felt a mix of relief and anticipation. The final pieces were falling into place. Across town, Xavier and Vanessa met in a dimly lit bar, their heads close together as they discussed their plans in hushed tones. "We need to move faster," Xavier urged. Dominic's wavering. "If we don't act now, we might lose our chance." Vanessa nodded, though a flicker of doubt crossed her face. "You're right. We'll accelerate the timeline. By this time next month, Reeves and Associates will be ours." As they clinked glasses, sealing their pact, neither realized they were playing directly into Dominic's hands. The puppet master's strings were drawing tight, and soon, very soon, the final act would begin. The annual Architectural Innovation Gala was in full swing. The city's elite mingled in the grand ballroom, champagne flutes in hand, their chatter a constant buzz beneath the soft classical music. Dominic Reeves stood near the stage, outwardly calm, but inwardly coiled like a spring. Tonight was the culmination of months of planning, the moment when all his careful manipulations would come to fruition. He caught sight of Vanessa across the room, resplendent in a form-fitting black gown, laughing at something Xavier Blackwood was saying. The sight of them together no longer filled him with pain or anger. Instead, he felt a cold determination. By the end of the night, their smiles would be wiped away. "Ladies and gentlemen," the MC's voice rang out, "please take your seats. Our keynote speaker for this evening, Mr. Dominic Reeves of Reeves and Associates, will begin shortly." As the crowd settled, Dominic made his way to the podium. He looked out over the sea of faces, colleagues, rivals, investors. They were all here to witness what they thought would be a standard speech about innovation in architecture. They had no idea they were about to become audience to the downfall of two of the industry's rising stars. "Good evening," Dominic began, his voice steady and confident. "Tonight, I want to talk about integrity in design, about the responsibility we have, not just to our clients, but to the very fabric of our cities and the people who inhabit them." As he spoke, Dominic wove a compelling narrative about ethics in architecture and construction. He could see heads nodding in agreement, people leaning forward in their seats. They were captivated, hanging on his every word. But integrity isn't just about following building codes or using sustainable materials, Dominic continued. It's about honesty in our business practices, loyalty to our partners, and a commitment to innovation that doesn't come at the cost of ethics. He paused, his finger hovering over a small remote in his hand. "Let me show you what I mean." With a click, the large screen behind him came to life. What appeared was not the expected slide about sustainable design, but instead a series of emails, financial records, and photographs. Dominic watched as confusion rippled through the crowd, quickly followed by shocked gasps and murmurs as people began to understand what they were seeing. "What you're looking at," Dominic said, his voice cutting through the growing chaos, "is evidence of a long-running corporate espionage operation. My wife, Vanessa Reeves, and Xavier Blackwood of Obsidian Structures have been engaged in a conspiracy to steal proprietary designs and information from Reeves and Associates." The room erupted in pandemonium. Dominic saw Vanessa's face drain of color, her eyes wide with shock and fear. Xavier was on his feet, his face contorted with rage. "This is preposterous," Xavier shouted. "You have no proof." Dominic's reply was calm, almost pitying. "On the contrary, Mr. Blackwood, I have all the proof I need." He gestured to a group of stern-faced individuals who had just entered the ballroom. "And so, do the FBI agents who are here tonight." As the agents moved through the crowd towards Vanessa and Xavier, Dominic continued his presentation. He laid out a damning case, presenting irrefutable evidence of their misdeeds to the stunned audience of industry players and now law enforcement. Vanessa, seeing the net closing in, made a desperate dash for the exit. But before she could reach it, she was cut off by a familiar face. Lydia Chun, no longer in her cleaner's disguise, but now sporting an FBI badge. "Going somewhere, Mrs. Reeves?" Lydia asked, her voice cold. Xavier, realizing the game was up, made a last-ditch effort to turn the tables. "You're no better than us Reeves," he shouted. "You've been manipulating events, playing us all like puppets. You're just as guilty." Dominic's response was to calmly present records of his recent activities, the charitable donations, the product testing of new security systems. Each action, seemingly innocent on its own, now revealed as part of his master plan to expose the corruption within the industry. "I may have bent the rules," Dominic admitted, "but I never broke them. Everything I've done has been in service of uncovering the truth and protecting the integrity of my company and our projects." As Vanessa and Xavier were led away in handcuffs, the room buzzed with shocked conversations. Dominic stepped down from the podium, feeling a mix of triumph and exhaustion. It was over. The house of cards had come crashing down. Marcus appeared at his side, clapping him on the shoulder. "You did it, Dom. It's finally over." Dominic nodded, watching as the last of the FBI agents exited the ballroom. "It's over," he agreed. "But the real work is just beginning." As the gala dissolved into a flurry of press statements and police interviews, Dominic stood apart from the chaos. Reeves and associates had emerged from this ordeal not just intact, but as a beacon of ethical practices in an industry plagued by corruption. The road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in months, Dominic felt ready to face it. The puppet master had cut his strings, and now, finally, he was free. The courthouse bustled with activity, a hive of suits and briefcases, murmured conversations, and clacking heels. Dominic Reeves stood in the lobby, his posture rigid, eyes scanning the crowd. He'd been here every day for the past week, watching as Vanessa and Xavier were dragged through a gauntlet of legal proceedings. Today was different. Today, he would take the stand. As he made his way through the security checkpoint, Dominic's mind wandered to the events that had led to this moment. The betrayal, the careful planning, the dramatic reveal at the Architectural Innovation Gala. It all seemed like a lifetime ago, yet the wounds were still fresh. The courtroom was a battlefield of a different sort. Vanessa and Xavier sat at separate tables, their lawyers flanking them like generals preparing for war. Dominic caught Vanessa's eye as he entered. For a moment, he saw a flicker of the woman he'd once loved, scared, vulnerable. But then her mask of cold indifference slipped back into place, and she turned away. The prosecution calls Dominic Reeves to the stand. Dominic rose, straightening his tie as he approached the witness box. He placed his hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and settled into the hard wooden chair. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, approached. "Mr. Reeves, please tell the court about the events leading up to the night of the Architectural Innovation Gala." Dominic took a deep breath and began his testimony. He spoke of late nights at the office, of overheard phone calls and discovered emails. He detailed the complex web of deceit that Vanessa and Xavier had woven, his voice steady and clear as he laid out each piece of evidence. As he spoke, Dominic could see the jurors' expressions changing. Shock gave way to disgust, then to anger. He'd meticulously documented everything, and now that preparation was paying off. Xavier's lawyer, a slick-haired man with a permanent sneer, tried to poke holes in Dominic's story during cross-examination. But Dominic was ready. For every accusation, he had a counterpoint. For every insinuation, he had proof to the contrary. "And you expect us to believe that you orchestrated this elaborate scheme solely to uncover the truth?" Xavier's lawyer asked, his voice dripping with skepticism. Dominic met his gaze steadily. "I expect you to look at the evidence, counselor. Everything I did was within the bounds of the law, with the sole purpose of exposing a criminal conspiracy that threatened not just my company, but the integrity of our entire industry." As Dominic stepped down from the stand, he caught sight of Marcus in the gallery. His friend and business partner gave him a subtle nod of approval. They both knew this was just the beginning. While the criminal trial unfolded in the public eye, Dominic was fighting another battle behind closed doors. The divorce proceedings with Vanessa were ugly, to say the least. Dominic's lawyer, a battle axe of a woman named Helena Graves, argued forcefully for a favorable settlement. "Your Honor, Mrs. Reeves' criminal activities have not only damaged my client emotionally, but have put his entire company at risk. We're asking for a complete separation of assets, with Mrs. Reeves forfeiting any claim to Reeves and Associates or its subsidiaries." Vanessa's lawyer tried to paint her as a victim of Xavier's manipulation, but Helena was having none of it. She presented email after email, document after document, each one damning Vanessa further. In the end, the judge ruled in Dominic's favor. Vanessa would walk away with nothing but her personal belongings and a small stipend, far less than she would have received in a normal divorce settlement. But Helena wasn't done. As Vanessa and her lawyer prepared to leave the courtroom, Helena approached the bench. "Your Honor, given the ongoing criminal investigation and the potential for retaliation, we're requesting a restraining order against Mrs. Reeves." The judge considered for a moment, then nodded. Granted, Mrs. Reeves is to have no contact with Mr. Reeves or any employees of Reeves and Associates, and is barred from accessing any shared assets or properties. Dominic watched as Vanessa's face crumpled. As Dominic left the courthouse that day, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The legal battles were far from over, but he'd won a significant victory. Reeves and Associates was safe, at least for now. But the real surprise came later that week, when Elizabeth Blackwood, Xavier's wife and CFO of Obsidian Structures, approached the prosecution. Furious at her husband's betrayal and facing the collapse of her own career, she offered to turn state's witness. Dominic sat in on her deposition, watching as she laid bare the inner workings of Obsidian's corrupt practices. Her testimony was a goldmine, providing context and corroboration for much of the evidence Dominic had gathered. As Elizabeth detailed Xavier's schemes, his backroom deals, and his plans to sabotage Reeves and Associates, Dominic felt satisfaction. The house of cards was well and truly collapsing now. With the legal proceedings in full swing, Dominic knew he couldn't devote his full attention to running Reeves and Associates. He called Marcus into his office one evening, long after most of the staff had gone home. "I need you to take charge of the day-to-day operations," Dominic said, leaning back in his chair. "I trust you to keep things running smoothly while I focus on these legal battles." Marcus nodded, his expression serious. "You can count on me, Dom. We've come too far to let anything slip now." As Marcus left the office, Dominic turned to look out the window at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, the verdant spire was waiting to be built. He'd fought hard to protect this dream, and he wasn't about to let it go now. The legal labyrinths were complex and treacherous, but Dominic was determined to see this through to the end. The reckoning had only just begun. The bail hearing for Xavier Blackwood was a tense affair. Despite the mountain of evidence against him, his lawyers had managed to convince the judge that he wasn't a flight risk. As Xavier walked out of the courthouse, a free man for the moment, his eyes met Dominic's. There was a promise in that look, a vow of revenge that sent a chill down Dominic's spine. Dominic didn't have to wait long to see what Xavier had planned. It was a crisp autumn morning when he got the call from the construction site of the verdant spire. "Mr. Reeves, there's been an incident." The site foreman's voice crackled over the phone. "An explosion. Small, but, sir, it looks deliberate." Dominic's blood ran cold. He was in his car and speeding towards the site before he'd even ended the call. As he pulled up to the construction zone, he saw the police cars, the fire trucks, the curious onlookers held back by yellow tape. The damage was minimal, a small blast in a non-critical area. But that wasn't the point. This was a message. As Dominic surveyed the scene, a detective approached him. "Mr. Reeves? We found this near the blast site." He held up an evidence bag containing a partially burned business card. Dominic's business card. "You've got to be kidding me," Dominic muttered. He knew immediately what this was. A frame job. Xavier was trying to pin this on him, to paint him as an eco-terrorist willing to sabotage his own project for. What? Insurance money? Publicity? It didn't matter. The accusation alone could be devastating. The next few days were a whirlwind of police interviews, press statements, and damage control. Dominic maintained his innocence, but he could see the doubt in people's eyes. The whispers followed him everywhere he went. It was Gabriella who provided the breakthrough. She'd been working late at the office, poring over security footage from the construction site, when she noticed something odd. "Dominic, look at this," she said, rewinding the footage. "See that van? It shows up every night for a week before the explosion, always at the same time. But it's not one of our contractors." Dominic leaned in, squinting at the grainy image. "Can you enhance that logo on the side?" Gabriella tapped a few keys, and the image sharpened. Dominic's eyes widened as he recognized the stylized O of Obsidian Structures. "Got you, you bastard," he murmured. With this new evidence, the tide quickly turned. The police investigation shifted focus, and soon they had traced the van back to a shell company owned by Xavier. It was a break they needed, The failed frame job backfired spectacularly on Xavier. Public opinion, which had been wavering, now solidified firmly behind Dominic. He was no longer just a wrong businessman. He was a victim of a malicious conspiracy, fighting back against corruption in the industry. But the real shock came when Vanessa, facing years in prison and seeing her chances of leniency evaporating, made a desperate play. She reached out to the prosecution, offering to testify against Xavier in exchange for a reduced sentence. Dominic sat in on her deposition, watching the woman he'd once loved spill secrets like poison from a wound. She detailed not just Xavier's schemes, but a broader conspiracy involving corrupt city officials and other major construction firms. It wasn't just Obsidian, Vanessa said, her voice barely above a whisper. Half the major projects in this city are built on bribes and kickbacks. The Verdant Spire was a threat to all of them. An actually sustainable, ethical project, it would have exposed everyone. As Vanessa talked, Dominic's mind raced. This was bigger than he'd imagined. It wasn't just about saving his company anymore. This was a chance to clean up the entire industry. He left the deposition and immediately called Marcus. "We need to pivot," he said without preamble. "The Verdant Spire isn't just a building project anymore. It's going to be the flagship of a new initiative. We're going to position Reeves and Associates as the leader in ethical, transparent construction practices." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "That's a big move, Dom. Are you sure about this?" Dominic looked out over the city skyline. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life. It's time we built something that matters." The next few weeks were a flurry of activity. Dominic gave interviews, wrote op-eds, and spoke at industry conferences. He used the information from Vanessa's testimony to shine a light on the dark corners of the construction world, positioning Reeves and Associates as a beacon of integrity in a corrupt industry. The public ate it up. Dominic became a sort of folk hero, the honest businessman fighting against a rigged system. Investors flocked to the Verdant Spire project, seeing it as not just a building, but a symbol of a new era in urban development. As the dust settled and the legal proceedings wound down, Dominic stood at the window of his office, looking out at the city he was helping to reshape. The path to this moment had been painful, filled with betrayal and hardship. But as he watched the sun set over the skyline, Dominic felt a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced in years. The reckoning wasn't over, not by a long shot. But for the first time since this all began, Dominic allowed himself to feel a glimmer of hope. The future, like the city spread out before him, was full of possibility. The congressional hearing room buzzed with anticipation. Journalists jostled for position, their cameras at the ready. Senators shuffled papers. Aides whispered last-minute advice. And at the center of it all, looking calm and collected, sat Dominic Reeves. "Mr. Reeves," the committee chairman began, "you've been invited here today to discuss the state of ethical urban development in our nation. Given your recent experiences, we're particularly interested in your perspective on transparency and sustainability in the construction industry. Please begin when you're ready." Dominic leaned forward, his voice clear and steady as he began to speak. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, what I'm about to share with you isn't just my story. It's a wake-up call for our entire industry and indeed for our cities themselves." Over the next hour, Dominic laid out a compelling vision of ethical urban development. He spoke of transparent bidding processes, of sustainable materials and practices, of buildings that serve communities rather than just turning profits. But more than that, he spoke of the rot at the heart of the current system: the corruption, the kickbacks, the corners cut at the expense of safety and sustainability. "The Verdant Spire project," Dominic said, his voice rising with passion, "was more than just a building. It was a threat to those who profit from the old way of doing things. That's why they tried to destroy it, and me along with it. But in doing so, they've given us an opportunity to rebuild not just a single structure, but an entire industry." As Dominic spoke, he could see the impact of his words. Senators leaned forward, their expressions intent. Journalists scribbled furiously in their notebooks. This wasn't just testimony. It was a call to action. We stand at a crossroads, Dominic concluded. We can continue down the path of short-term profit and long-term destruction, or we can choose a new way, a way that values transparency, sustainability, and the needs of our communities. The choice is ours. Thank you. The room erupted in applause as Dominic stepped back from the microphone. As he made his way out of the hearing room, he was mobbed by reporters, all clamoring for additional comments. But Dominic's mind was already elsewhere, focused on the next steps in his plan. The congressional testimony had the effect Dominic had hoped for. It captured national attention, sparking debates about urban development and ethical business practices. More importantly, it positioned Reeves and Associates as a leader in this new paradigm. When the bidding opened for an expanded version of the Verdant Spire project, now envisioned as a citywide green infrastructure initiative, Reeves and Associates was the clear frontrunner. Their proposal, which integrated sustainable design principles with community-focused development, was hailed as visionary. The day they won the bid, Dominic called the entire staff into the main conference room. As he looked out over the sea of faces, some familiar, some new, he felt a surge of pride. Today marks a new chapter for Reeves and Associates, he began. We're not just building a tower anymore. We're building the future of our city. Each one of you has played a part in getting us here, and each one of you will be crucial in what comes next. He paused, his eyes finding Gabriella in the crowd. Which brings me to my next announcement. In recognition of her invaluable contributions and unwavering loyalty, I'm promoting Gabriela Santos to partner. The room broke into applause as a stunned Gabriela made her way to the front. As Dominic shook her hand, he saw in her eyes the same determination, the same passion for ethical architecture that had driven him all these years. "Thank you," Gabriela said, her voice thick with emotion. "I promise to uphold the values that Reeves and Associates stands for." As the celebration wound down and the staff filtered out, Dominic retreated to his office. He had one more piece of business to attend to. The next morning, Dominic held a press conference to announce the establishment of the Reeves Foundation for Ethical Architecture. Funded by his divorce settlement and a significant portion of his personal wealth, the foundation would provide scholarships for aspiring architects and fund watchdog initiatives to promote transparency in the industry. "This foundation," Dominic told the assembled press, "is my way of ensuring that what happened to me, to my company, never happens to anyone else. We're going to shine a light into every dark corner of this industry until there's nowhere left for corruption to hide." As Dominic fielded questions from the press, across town another drama was unfolding. Xavier Blackwood sat in a courtroom ashen-faced as the judge read out the verdict. Guilty on all charges. His empire was crumbling, Obsidian structures already in the throes of bankruptcy. Vanessa's fate was less severe but no less final. Her reduced sentence meant she'd see the outside of a prison cell again, but her reputation was in tatters. The judge's ruling barred her from ever working in the architecture or construction industries again. Months passed. The Verdant Spire began to rise from the ground, its innovative design a testament to what was possible when ethics and innovation worked hand in hand. Dominic threw himself into the project, overseeing every detail, determined to make it a model for future developments around the world. On the day the final beam was placed atop the Verdant Spire, Dominic took a private elevator to the observation deck. As the door slid open, he stepped out onto the platform, the wind whipping around him. The city sprawled out below, a tapestry of light and shadow in the fading afternoon sun. Dominic walked to the edge, his hands gripping the railing. From this vantage point, he could see the scars of the old city, the neglected neighborhoods, the polluted waterways, the congested streets. But he could also see the first signs of change. Green spaces were sprouting up where there had once been only concrete. Solar panels glinted on rooftops. The Verdant Spire itself stood as a beacon of what was possible when innovation and ethics worked hand in hand. He thought about the cost of this victory. His marriage destroyed, friendships shattered, the innocence of believing in a fair and just world, lost forever. But as he looked out over the city he'd fought so hard to protect and improve, Dominic felt a sense of purpose that transcended personal loss. The sound of footsteps behind him broke his reverie. Gabriella approached, a hard hat tucked under her arm. "It's really something, isn't it?" she said, coming to stand beside him at the railing. Dominic nodded. "It's more than I ever imagined it could be." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, both lost in thought. Then Gabriella spoke again. "I heard about Xavier's conviction. 20 years, with no possibility of parole for at least 15. Dominic's jaw tightened. "It's what he deserves. Obsidian Structures is finished. The bankruptcy proceedings will ensure that every investor, every employee gets what they're owed." Gabriella hesitated, then added, "And Vanessa?" A flood of emotions washed over Dominic at the mention of his ex-wife's name. Anger, betrayal, and underneath it all, a lingering sadness for what might have been. 5 years, he said finally. Reduced sentence for her testimony. But she'll never work in this industry again. The judge made sure of that. Gabriella nodded, then turned to face Dominic fully. "So what now?" "We've won. The Verdant Spire is nearly complete. The Reeves Foundation is changing the face of architectural education. What's next for Dominic Reeves?" Dominic smiled, a genuine expression that reached his eyes for the first time in what felt like years. "Now, Gabriella, we build. Not just buildings, but a legacy, a way of doing business that values more than just the bottom line. We've been given a second chance, and I intend to make the most of it." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the verdant spire's shadow across the city, Dominic felt a sense of peace settle over him. The path to this moment had been fraught with betrayal, pain, and hardship. But standing here, overlooking the city he dedicated his life to improving, Dominic knew that every sacrifice had been worth it. The future stretched out before him, as vast and full of possibility as the city's skyline. And for the first time in a long time, Dominic Reeves was ready to face it head on. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.